I'm head of marketing at Silver Cloud, and you're going to be hearing from Ben because he is our resident expert on this topic. So Ben, if you're ready, shall I hand over to you now and I'll just let people in as and when they arrive?
Yes, thank you, Aisling. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm not too fussed if you can see me. I'm sure that's not a big thing, but hopefully you can hear me okay. As these webinars are, I'm running a little bit blind because I've got the presentation, so I can't really see you or what's going on, but I know that I have Aisling in the background. So as she said, that if there are any questions that flow through, the Q&A slot is open, and if we have time at the end, we can maybe address some of those. So I can hear people still coming in, but as Aisling said, we need to be prompt, so we'll start the presentation. So I just wanted to obviously talk about what we're going to speak about today, which, as Aisling said, is a situation that we see very often at Silver Cloud, is making the case for a new HR system, and really some tips and tricks here on how to effectively sell that proposition with your own board. So hopefully that you'll be able to take away some good information. So just an introduction to myself. My name's Ben. I'm head of sales at Silver Cloud. I've just a quick background. I've been about 20 years in HCM software sales, both from a frontline sales perspective and also some leadership roles. And in my time, I've covered everything across the HRIS spectrum, including HR, payroll, rostering, and all the relevant talent and engagement modules or elements that you might see as well. So hopefully I can impart some information. More importantly, I want to just talk about very quickly about what Silver Cloud do. We are an HRIS technology transformation consultancy. What that means in real worlds is we provide different kinds of consultation support, both with helping clients with things like this, business cases, also helping them as a whole of market selection provider to help clients choose the right vendor, should they be lucky enough to research the marketplace. And also we help clients on the implementation side as well. So the reason I mentioned that is that obviously when we help clients with things like digital reviews, which incorporate helping clients push business cases through, we see lots and lots of different things, different tips and tricks, different obstacles in terms of that overall process. So the idea really around today is to sort of impart what we see in our day-to-day, and really this is designed to give you the insights that you might need into trying to make any process such as creating a business case as successful as possible, because the whole idea is to create a watertight business case that has the best possible chance of getting through to the next stage. Why sales? Normally in sales, my team stay away from best practice webinars, because at the end of the day it should really be delivered by consultants, because they're at the coalface. But because this is about selling it internally, we're going to put a little bit of a sales spin on it, and hopefully we're going to make it fun along the way as well for you. So what we're going to look at today in terms of like the agenda is formulating your game plan, is looking at pitching the different priorities of the business to your board, and really focusing on compiling that business case. What are the elements that you need to include to make that compelling? As Aisling said, by far, especially at the moment in terms of the current climate, this is the biggest challenge that we see clients having, is actually getting business proposals through and greenlit to get to that next stage. Obviously, there is a lot of reliance on budgets and trust with your board to do that. And one of the key themes that we'll be focusing on today, apart from getting everyone on side, is the cost of doing nothing. That is the biggest blocker and the biggest outcome that we see, where clients want to do something, but other things get in the way. Budgets get spent on other projects, and in the end, you don't end up doing anything, which is not a good place to be. Now we're going to try and make this fun, and us at Silver Cloud, whatever you might know about us, you might not know that we're all massive Ted Lasso fans. Now, we're going to use the Ted Lasso theme because I think a lot of it is relevant. Now, just to say, if you've never heard of Ted Lasso, it's a show that's on Apple TV. If you haven't seen it, don't worry, you don't need to know about it to get this, what you need from this webinar. But if you have seen it, I think you'll probably smile wryly, because a lot of this is relevant. For those that haven't seen it, Ted Lasso is an amazing comedy series that actually, in this world where things aren't great, if you want a half an hour of just complete goodness and escapism, it's amazing. It addresses some very serious issues in a very good way. And it's if you want a business or you want a life coach in your life, above and beyond your family or friends, Ted Lasso is the man to do it. It really is quite an amazing series, and it's something that we've talked about a lot in terms of the values and the behaviours within Silver Cloud. But as I say, I'm not here to talk about Ted Lasso, but we're going to try and make it a little bit fun along the way. So again, what we're going to talk about is this is really getting your senior stakeholders or your C-suite, your team, if we're going to take the football sayings, getting them on side. Now, one of the key things, and I'm not going to do any plot spoilers here with Ted Lasso, but one of the themes with Ted Lasso is that Ted Lasso, who is a character in the show, he is an outsider when we see him. He's an American football coach. He's as American as they come, and he's brought into Richmond FC, into England, in a completely different culture, to make the team a success. Even though there's some other subplots going on that might reduce those chances with him. The key to this, though, is that he is an outsider completely, and his success is that he brings people on side and he aligns them to his vision and his values. And we find that actually, if you're an HRD or a senior HR stakeholder, that's kind of what you have to do to bring people on side. So we're going to introduce a bit of Ted Lasso karma into this, and we're going to take our C-suite and we're going to effectively Ted Lasso them. Now, one of the key things about this is we need to understand our stakeholders by addressing their key concerns. So what you first need to do is you really need to zone in on those individual priorities that those key stakeholders might have. Now, depending on their roles, CEO, CFO, they're all going to be different. And effectively, what we need to think about is, most people, when they're faced with making a decision or engaging on some additional work, they want to know, what's in it for me? What am I going to get out of it? What's my team going to get out of it? How is it going to help me? And usually in these scenarios, this is around increasing efficiency of the business, improving critical decision making at the point of need, and of course enhancing employee engagement through either systems that support employees better, systems that engage teams better, or systems that actually make the team or the manager's job a lot easier to do. And also the key is reducing costs. If we put this investment in, are we going to get that investment back? How is it going to enable us to reduce costs in the right way? And one of the key reasons that's really important to zone in on these individual priorities is that you obviously need your C-suite on board to greenlight the project, but more importantly, you need them on board all the way through, because there will be bumps in the road and there will be times when you need their support and you need to know that they've got your back. So it's really important. So we're not going to go into these individual priorities, but these are examples of what we see as we go through those. But it's really key that through your discovery stage, you understand what is keeping them awake at night. Now we get into sort of like a pre-match briefing, and I actually think this is probably one of the best useful summary slides. Before we look at anything, we're going to really focus on what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve is consensus agreement, and we don't want anyone doing nothing. That's the key. So that's our main objectives here. And what is really nice is that the sort of end goal, if you like, of any business proposal is to get your stakeholders bought into recognizing the issues that we face in the organization, the impact that they have, and be open to the remedies that are in front of us. And so really what you've got to try and do is start with the end outcome in mind. So the end outcome is agreement and green light of your proposal. So we need to build a path to get us there. And this path would look something very much like this. So understanding the pains, what are the business implications of the situation that we're in now? Who's affected and how are they affected? What is the severity of those? How much are they affecting the business, key areas of the business, and therefore that might define their priority. What are the goals of the business? What does the business need to achieve in the next 1, 2, 3, 5 years? And how can an HR transformation, system transformation help them? It's not going to be the magic bullet, but help you get there. Then we need to really important measure. We need to measure what the efficiencies mean to us as a business in terms of putting numbers to issues where we can, and we will focus on that a little bit later, and what that means in terms of real hard cost impact to the business. And then we need to really do our research. We need to show that we are not just looking at what can be achieved, but how it can be achieved in terms of exploring the market at a high level desktop analysis, exploring the capability of vendors out there and what's in the market. Obviously having some idea of what the investment might look like. Now it's going to be vague at this point because we're not entering a selection process, but at least having an idea. Having an idea also of timescales, because project timescales, whether that's 6, 9 months or however long a project might be, that is going to impact the business, and you're going to have to change the way that you work to facilitate this transformation. And of course, tied in with that, how is this going to affect our internal effort in terms of our internal resources? So when we're thinking about what Ted Lasso might do, is that he might get up in front of his team and he will talk about the current position of play. Now, bear in mind that Richmond FC were kind of a little bit in relegation. So the executive summary is probably not going to be a great read, because if it is a great read, why are you doing it in the first place? It's got the executive summary's really got to map out the evidence in terms of where you are and what the issues are. This is almost your as is state. And to some clients, this is a bit of a dystopia moment. This is, oh my God, we do need to do something, because if we don't, things are only going to get worse. But then you need to really use the Ted Lasso magic and bring people along with you. And what you need to do is you really need to start talking about the future state and provide them a window, a glimpse of what can be achieved. And this is where, this is what Ted Lasso does really well. He takes the team on a journey. He talks about the art of the possible, how you can work together to achieve that, and what the positive outcomes will look like and what that world will look like. And this, in some cases, is the utopia moment. This is Ted Lasso bringing the team from relegation to maybe top of the Premier League and beyond. But there's work to do. One of the things that I'm just going to bring in, and don't worry, I'm not going to read through this. We'll send this to you as part of the pack. This is our Silver Cloud's digital HR maturity model. And it's a really, really useful resource that we use when we first talk to clients. And what it basically is a ladder, which is going through the different levels of maturity and impact that an HR system or an HRS system can provide, and as a result, the impact that you can provide as HR and payroll professionals. And when we talk to clients, we tend to say, no, look, be really honest. Where do you think you are now? You're coming to us for help. Where do you think you are? And most clients will say, well, we are immature. And the immature state right at the bottom of that ladder is we've got Excel spreadsheets, or we've got very basic systems. There's no integration, there's no reporting, there's limited efficiency. It's not a very good story. And we go, fine, at least you know where you are. And what we want to try and do is work with you to understand how you get to the right of the top, which is a top tier, almost the predictive, which is where you're using the best technology to the best efficiency. You're getting the reporting, you're getting even going as far as having AI to help with some of those decision makings. And what that's doing is that when you get to the predictive side, you're really adding massive impact to the organization in many, many areas. But obviously you're not going to get from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder. So obviously what we need to work with clients is about, right, you're immature at the moment, or you might be sort of conceptual. Phase one might get you to that middle tier where you've got a single source of the truth, you've got a solution that's catering for all of your territories, you're starting to use self-service, you're starting to get some engagement, you're starting to see the value. So this is a really good journey that how it shows that you can really hit those milestones. So we will share this later, but I just thought it was worth showing that kind of evolution. What we need to do is lay out our business cases, creating what we call effectively, a new game plan. And this is kind of mapping out your entire plan. So again, Ted Lasso is talking to his team. He's looking at different strategies based on the situation that you are at the moment, but in terms of where we want to go, what that's going to look like, and the journey that that's going to be. And we need to cover off all eventualities. So I suppose the idea of a good business case is being able to address the potential questions of the key stakeholders that you have in the business before they actually have a chance to ask them. So, we need to cover our, for want of a better phrase, our dystopia and our utopia moments and our themes, but also you need to talk about how you're going to get there. So we need to think in the proposal, we've thought about and we've looked at the time that's involved, the internal resource that might be required, what potentially good phasing might look like to get the best out of the system without impacting the business too much, and of course what that investment would, and potentially any risks that we may need to flag along the way that we can try and mitigate up front. So I think it's really good because it's not just talking about we know what the bad things are, we know what we've got to fix, but also providing that sort of journey or that game plan to get there. Now, the case for a new people system, again, I'm not going to go into this in a lot of detail. And these are just examples, okay? And there's probably lots of examples that you could think of, but this is just showing the high-level examples that we see in an organization. One of the key things is we always say to clients, don't overplay the issues, because there are probably loads of issues that you've discovered. Now, you obviously have talked to your C-suite and got some very strategic views of the business, but you may have also gone and talked to managers and employees just to get what it feels like on the ground. This is Ted Lasso talking to the people on the pitch who are scoring the goals and taking the corners, not the management team, to actually what is it like out there? What's the problem? And you're going to have a massive long list. So the key is to try and condense those into an easily bite-sized level of what the situation is. So less is definitely more when you're trying to get buy-in from the C-suite. And you need to obviously prioritize these by the effect. What is the effect, and how are these going to most impact the business or the individuals involved? So it's not just about what the problems are, it's really about how are they holding the business back, how are they affecting key individuals. And again, this is usually, as we said before, 4 or 5 key themes in terms of these problems. It's about cost. It's about managing cost. It's about increasing efficiency. It's about engagement, employee engagement in the business as a whole, and that support mechanism. And often it's about compliance as well. Now, what I mean about less is more is we were talking to a client recently. They're global, and we're actually helping them with the implementation. They're a global client. They're constantly growing globally, so it's an ever-changing benchmark, and they had lots of problems. They were moving from lots and lots of systems that weren't really working well together to a single vendor. And we said to them, what's the thing that's keeping you awake at night? And one thing was the HRD said, well, at the moment we can't get reporting. So there's a million problems, but reporting is one. And we said, okay, tell us about that. Tell us what this means to you on a week basis. So they have to provide weekly reports to the board. That consists of 8 regional managers who are spending approximately 2 hours per week manually collating this and formatting this data from disparate systems or Excel spreadsheets, so that they can then accumulate that and send it to central office. The data is then taken from all these regions by the central payroll team, and then they have to manually consolidate all this info and format it into sort of like some sort of high-level board KPIs. And this takes them about 4 hours a week. So we did some maths with them and we said, well, okay, so you know that's the best case scenario. So best case scenario is on a monthly basis, you are wasting potentially 80 hours of highly skilled resource per month. And we estimated that based on average salary, that's probably around 100 to 110K. But the HRD said, well, that's great, I get that. But the other problem is I've got my team leaving. I've got good people leaving because at the end of the day, they don't want to do this job. It's boring, it's stressful, it's not utilizing their skills. And often they're doing it out of office as well. So aside from what we're paying them, it's what we're not paying them in terms of what they're doing on a Sunday evening, and they're leaving. So what we're saying is that actually the business case got through pretty much on that, even though there were 5 or 6 other priorities that needed to be done. But that was such a problem that it's sort of, that's a problem, and think of all the other underlining problems behind that. So it's better to have 5 of these kind of examples than trying to sort of impress by volume, by sort of 15 or 20 cases. So it's quite easy to build that once you know the problems. So once you understand the problems, it's really important to manage the objectives in terms of, and again, making these very concise, making them achievable, and obviously directly aligning them to the problems that you've already established in the previous page. So again, okay, we know the problem. This is the objectives of what we need to do to fix them. And obviously that will then start creating that story for when you hopefully will go out to the vendors. Project scope is a key thing because, again, we want to be transparent with all the stakeholders, and we want to manage their expectations, and we want to keep them fully informed. So whilst we can talk about the problems and the objectives in solving those problems, it is also about the getting there. How do we get there to make sure that we can do this properly? And one HRD said to me, the problem with business cases is that they can't be all bubbles and candy floss. It can't just be about, wow, we're going to do this and it's going to be great. You've got to outline what the scope's going to look like in terms of potential module elements. So there may be modules that you desperately need for phase 1 based on the scenarios that you've put forward, but there could be other modules that you go, well, actually, that's okay. That's serviceable at the moment. It's not priority. Let's do that as either de-scope them, or let's do that as a manageable phase 2. And obviously, when we look at vendors, we need to make sure they're future-proof, so that actually, if we need to go back for them for that piece of functionality, we can do. So it starts to sort of think about what you really need from the market and how you're going to phase this. And obviously, we need to consider the phasing based on the need. So and also the impact that it might have on the business. So phase 1 will be maybe to meet your key requirements, and phase 2 might be to add more and more value to the business. But obviously, if you think about that digital maturity model, you can't go from 0 to hero without progressing up that ladder. And also looking at the time impact. So what is this going to take? How is it going to affect the business? How do we make sure we mitigate any risks around not having enough resource due to, obviously your business as usual priorities? And we'll look on that a little bit later as well. What is interesting is that it might be worth doing a little bit of vendor analysis. Now, I appreciate you're not at the shopping stage. You don't have the budget to go out and formally look at vendors. So we do say, look, do some vendor research if you can on the internet, because there's lots of information out there, both on their websites, both on other forums such as LinkedIn. You get a feel for what the offering is. And I appreciate there might be some vendors on here, so I don't want to talk out of turn, but sometimes you might wish to engage with some vendors directly and just maybe reach out to them and say, look, this is my situation. I haven't got authority to spend, but I'm putting a business case together. Can you just tell me a little bit about the capability, maybe what the costs might be? And I appreciate it's going to be very high level and very estimated, probably a scaled fee at this point. But some vendors will probably engage with that because at the end of the day, it's early engagement for them. And obviously they want to help potential customers get a proposal pre-green lit. So obviously what I'm saying here is just explore the market at a very high level, maybe 3 or 4 vendors that you know are in the market, just so that you can start to put some vendor analysis through and fulfill your business case in a bit more detail. And when we talk about costs, as I said, the C-suite will want to know what this is going to cost, right? And you can't have those answers at the moment. You haven't been able to do that due diligence because you're just not there yet. But as well as providing maybe some scale costs in terms of, well, it could be from this to this, and that obviously depends on your own organization's complexity and the scale of the project. What you can sort of talk about is, generally speaking, pricing modules are fairly standard in terms of that they're led by employee licenses. Obviously, the cost will be dependent on what we finally decide to do in terms of rolling out. But you can cover the licensing in terms of, this is the potential 5-6 year cost with the annual fees. This is the 1 year cost when you think of licenses plus implementation. And then you can also think about what you might need to do with internal resources. Do we have enough resources to manage our side of the project as a client, or do we need to think about hiring people in or hiring a consultancy in? Again, they're things that you just want to think about. What you also want to think about is, what is the outgoing systems like? Because obviously this is a large investment, but if you're going to replace 5 or 6 separate solutions with one solution, hopefully, then you can actually offset some of those costs by going, well, we need to make sure that when we implement the new solution, that's tied in, that we're not overlapping licenses with any new ones as best as we can. So, you're starting to think about offsetting costs there. This is a really key point. Now, you would think, okay, we would say this because obviously Silver Cloud, we can help with helping you internally resource, but hand on heart, when we talk to clients, when they're in implementation mode, the greatest risk to a project is that they are not able to resource it internally. And I know that you don't have to think about this now to the level of detail because, as I've said, you're not there yet. But this slide is a typical scenario of internal effort. And again, I will stress, it can very much vary depending on the size and the scale of your individual organizations. But I want to reassure you that a lot of these internal roles can be fulfilled by more than one person, so they can be shared, which could help. And most of these roles are part-time because there are certain times where the project will require more or less, depending on the cadence of the project, of those particular resources. And we've got lots of information that we can share. But the point is that it is worth considering the type of internal commitment that you have. The rule of thumb, and I will say this is not across the board, but there is a presumption that we bring a vendor on board, they are going to implement the solution. Of course they are, but there is responsibility on your side. Up to 50% of the work needs to be done by yourselves. So for every hour that a vendor spends, in theory, it could be an hour of some collective resource that you need. So you just need to be prepared for that particular journey. And it's important to think about this now in terms of who this is going to be in your organization and how that fits in with your BAU responsibilities within your organization. It might get you thinking about timings, because there just might not be a good time in the organization to do this type of transformational project, because there's other important things going on for that particular time. So again, we'll move on from this, but it's very key that you sort of at least have a look at this and think about this. So when we talk about benefits, we've talked about benefits and we've talked about how you can align those benefits. And, again, benefits can be categorized into business performance, in terms of digitization of the employee experience, in terms of having data to be able to drive things properly. So of course, that's making your business more performance, enhancing your business performance and seeing that return on investment. But it's also about the people management as well. Is it, will it allow us to make sure that the right people are doing the right jobs, the best of their ability at the right time? Can we enhance performance through increased training or increased one-to-one conversations, lots and lots of things that you can do with getting the best out of the people that you have. And then you've got things like business system management, which is, okay, yeah, what systems are we decommissioning? What savings can we make by not having so many systems around? And how can we create a much better IT architecture by reducing the number of the horrible integrations that we might have in the organization? But the key to this is really, it's also putting your people first. It's also saying, yes, we want to be more effective as an organization, but it's about, what does this mean if we can give all of our teams, those players on the pitch that are scoring the goals, taking the corners, doing the training, those people, what can we give them that's going to make their jobs better, easier, more frictionless? And actually, how is that going to look as an organization? If we're an organization that is investing in technology, we might not do it quite right all the time, but we're trying to get there, we're always looking to improve, it can really improve the retention of your staff and actually increase your brand. And we talk about employee well-being, it's really important, but there are really nice little things that you can do as part of a general implementation that will really allow people to feel that you as an organization are invested in making them as successful as possible. Now, the last thing to say on this slide is that it is all about, when you talk about benefits, it's about making them measurable. So what you've got to do is, we can't just talk about what utopia is without backing it up with obviously the evidence based of what your pains are, but also using tangible and achievable return on investment stats. Now, we have a business case calculator that we will provide to you, which effectively allows you to take an example of the problems that you have and put those into some draft numbers and see what comes out the other side. And again, I will say, don't do loads. It's about sticking to resolving the issues that you've already identified are causing the most impact across the business, across those key individuals. And as I said, keep them achievable. Don't overinflate the potential ROI outcome just for impact. So I'll give you an example. When we see some of these business cases, some clients tend to take a sort of finger in the air approach and go, if we implement this system, we're going to reduce absent rates by 30% across the board. You're not. This is not a magic bullet. It's not going to do that. And that's highly inflated. But instead, what you could show, for example, is say, well, let's start by having a goal of looking at the way the solution can work to achieve 5% reduction. And we're going to equate that with a tangible cost saving. So if we have 3,000 people in the staff and we have these 3,000 people in the organization, we have these absence rates, even if we reduce it by 5%, that is an achievable, tangible, hard cost benefit that we are happy to put into that calculation. And if we can think of 5 or 6 other scenarios, that will soon add up, and it will give the stakeholders the reality that they're not just seeing the investment in front of them, they're seeing some hard case examples of, once the system is in, this is where it's going to give me return on investment and save me money. So this is the sell that we're talking about, because you're selling the vision and you're trying to offset the fear around, oh my God, this number in front of me, whatever that might be, as well as the effort and potential impact it might have of implementing such an organization. So we're nearly at the last slide, and I'm conscious of time. One of the things that we touched about earlier on in the slide deck is be prepared for questions. It's really about anticipating the questions and mitigating them with good research. And as I said, all these questions will tend to be around cost, risk, and impact. And so on this slide, we may have some of our stakeholders who will come back with specific questions, maybe specific blockers or specific concerns that you need to try and mitigate by giving the answers to. So it's just, again, with all the things that we've discussed, it's really just doing your homework. Because anticipating the questions that you may be asked by the board will actually help you prepare in terms of how you answer them. So it's really key to just try and make sure that no stone is unturned, so that when you do have follow-up questions, when you've submitted a proposal, you can talk those through in terms of what that might look like. So in summary, what we're trying to achieve here is we're trying to recap the issues that you are currently facing. What is the problems that we have? We're trying to highlight the benefits to your people. What does good look like? What can we achieve with being more efficient? How can we get people on board? What's the positive effect to the organization? So number one is your dystopia. Number two is your utopia. Number 3 and 4, which is sort of knowing your audience, anticipating and responding to key concerns. One thing I meant to cover off, which I didn't at the beginning of the slide, is also know your audience personality. Not just what they want to achieve, but what type of personality are they? Ted Lasso, he's an optimist. You're going to get him on board, no problem. He's going to be your main coach. He's going to move things forward. Nate, who's a bit of a villain, a pantomime villain in Ted Lasso, he's going to potentially be your blocker. So you need to, you probably understand these people already, but you need to understand where they're coming from, what their agendas are, because you will have coaches, you will have people who are real optimists and really want to get it done and are behind you, and you will have people that may be trying to block it, often for very valid reasons, but you need to try and understand that. And you need to be realistic about your goals and the vendor market, because effectively you can't just say we're going to go from the bottom of the ladder to the top of the ladder. There is some things that we need to do, and there's things that we need to be aware of to make it a success. So those 2 points, 3 and 4, that's your consensus buy-in, absolutely critical. And obviously the key part is use data to tell your story. We can't just go completely Ted Lasso and go everything's going to be great and look at the vision. We need to be able to use data to say, based on the data that we have on a cost calculator, if we can do some subtle improvements, look at what we could achieve just by underestimating. Obviously, we want to do more, but keeping them realistic, backing up what you want to achieve with tangible evidence of where you are now versus the ROI spend that could be the case. And really, our last slide is going back full circle to the cost of doing nothing. Now, I'm not going to read all of these things, but these are some of the things, the outcomes that we have, which can actually impact you with the cost of doing nothing. The true fact is that what we see on the ground are twofold with the cost of doing nothing. The first mistake that we see when people do nothing is that they only do something when their backs are against the wall and they're completely out of options. We see this a lot. And what is this? The main example is, oh my God, we've got to change our systems because the other one is being unsupported, or the other systems that we have are just no longer completely fit for purpose. And therefore we need to make a decision, and we need to implement a new system in 3 or 4 months, because if we don't, we're going to be maybe signed to a long contract with another vendor that we no longer want to proceed with. And that means risk, because we've seen it ourselves. Organizations come to us and say, we need you to help us select a solution. We've managed to get budget, but we need it done in 4 to 5 months. And we go, hang on a minute, you're at selection stage. You've got to go through a selection process with us. Then you've got to negotiate. You've got to find the right vendor. Then you've got to negotiate contracts, which we know takes time. Then you've got to agree a time with that vendor. And you want this done in 4 or 5 months. We'll get you there, maybe, but it's going to be risky. On all kinds of fronts, both in terms of making the right decision and being able to implement that in a good way. So we never get to the point where you do it at the last minute. The other example is that they're forced into action by other consequences. We see this a lot. We haven't done anything, everything's been okay, but suddenly we've got a security breach, which we can't repeat, or which may result in compliance issues or even a fine. Or there's an employment law issue that's raised its head because the way that we managed the process in the system wasn't foolproof and something's gone wrong. So it's very reactionary. Or what we see a lot as well is it's a relationship breakdown. We've got to the point where we no longer feel we have a relationship with this vendor. The system might be okay, but you're not talking to each other. You want to divorce. And that can be a very sort of difficult time when you're trying to then escalate a process to a select system. Or as we've seen a couple of years ago, and I don't want to be that person that mentions the P word, but the pandemic. we had a load, we grew significantly during the pandemic, because once that initial sort of freeze process was done, where everyone didn't know really what they were up against, everyone was concerned about the pandemic itself, but also went through 3 or 4 months of making sure people could work from home. Suddenly they realized that this massive change meant that all the things they really knew weren't really working with their solutions suddenly brought it to the front, and they literally came to us and said, we can't work in the same way anymore. We don't know how long we need to work in a remote environment or a hybrid environment. We are completely we're completely at a loss, and we should have done this earlier, but the pandemic has escalated all those issues. So again, not the greatest scenario during a pandemic to have additional stress when you're actually trying to implement an HR system. So what we want to take away, aside from the consensus agreement, which is really important, and hopefully we've sort of talked about that, is that the cost of doing nothing is not nothing. It can actually be very expensive to an organization, and it can also be dangerous for your business. So please, whatever you do, the cost of doing nothing is the least advisable option. So I wanted to just take this time to thank you for your time. Obviously, I appreciate you've taken an hour out of your day, and the best that we can do is maybe finish at least on time or a little bit earlier. Just to let you know that this is one in a many of webinars that we're doing, and obviously what we're trying to do is help you progress through the whole process. So obviously this one covers off, you know, getting business cases greenlit, but we do have other webinars that look at selection best practice all the way through to implementation and change management. So if this is something that's on your radar, then I do recommend that you look at these demos. As these webinars, sorry, as Aisling did say, you know, we will send you a recording of this webinar. We will send you the resources in terms of the ROI calculator, and we will send you that digital maturity model, just so that you've got some additional things to look at and some resources. So again, all I want to say is very much thank you for your time. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's given you some tips and tricks. And I'm just going to hand back to Aisling now in case there are any questions that might have come up that we can answer here. If not, we can always come back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. That's brilliant. So again, we have not had any Q&As come through at the moment, so you must have covered absolutely everything. Fantastic, job done. That being said, obviously, if you do have any questions about anything that Ben has covered, or once you receive all of the resources as well, and you want to have a little chat further about what you've received, then reach out. Ben is on LinkedIn, quite active on LinkedIn, so scope him out there. You can also get in touch with us in general via the website. So whichever's easiest for you. But yeah, as Ben said, thank you so much for giving up some of your time. You've got time left for a cup of coffee or a quick sandwich or something. And other than that, hopefully we'll see you next time on one of our upcoming webinars. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll let you go. Thank you. Cheers, everybody.